So it's been a pretty good period for you. Things with your family members seem to be smooth sailing, and then bam, something happens, and suddenly you feel like you're on a completely different team from other family members. You might even feel like you don't even know your family. What are some examples? Well, imagine this. Your father is diagnosed with cancer. You and your brother urge chemo. But your sister and your mom say, let's just move him to hospice care. Another example, you're really, really sorry your sister got divorced. But the reality is her husband has been your best friend since high school. And frankly, no matter what she says, that's just not changing now. If any of these examples relate to you, or you have your own stories of suddenly feeling like you're in a chasm far, far away from the rest of the family, put those stories into the comments below. Truth of the matter is, there's a lot you can do to make things go better. They range from thoughtful preparation to skills building. And today, I'm going to give you some tips on how to avoid common pitfalls and set yourself up for the best possible conversation with family members going forward. I'm Bob Bordone. I'm a senior fellow at Harvard Law School. I'm the founder and former director of Harvard Law School's Negotiation and Mediation clinical program. I taught negotiation, conflict resolution, mediation, and many other courses at Harvard Law School for more than 2 decades, and I'm a founder and principal of the Cambridge Negotiation Institute. As we get started, I want to share with you a real-life example of a major mediation that I was involved with some years ago. So this involves an inherited property that belonged to 6 siblings. The siblings were highly avoidant and in fact let the property sit completely undeveloped because at some level they knew that they didn't see eye to eye on how to deal with the property. Like many family members who see a big conflict in the offing, they use avoidance as a way to stave it off. That lasted until the county wrote to the family saying that they were going to be taking the property for lack of payment of taxes. That's correct. As part of the avoidance, no one in the family paid the property taxes for several years. The first mistake the family made was avoiding really hard issues. But I quickly learned that avoidance was actually selective. Family members who knew they were aligned had spent an enormous amount of time gossiping, building coalitions, and triangulating. And these are things that you want to avoid in a big family conflict. The last thing you want to be doing is talking about each other instead of to each other. Second thing I want to invite you to do is something that I call a 2-chair exercise. So what is that? Typically what I've discovered is when you're in a deep conflict with a family member, there is a side of you that really wants to and needs to raise those issues with the other members of the family. And there's a side of you that does not want to, that wants to avoid it. In the 2-chair exercise, I literally invite people to take 2 chairs and go back and forth, and in 1 chair, they list all of the reasons why they really need to have the hard conversation. And then they get up, and in the other chair, they talk about all the reasons why they do not. This exercise may feel very affected, but it's incredibly helpful to articulate just how important engagement is. And interestingly, it also provides an opening line into the conversation with other family members. And so part of the work I did with this family is with each individual, we did a 2-chair exercise. And that gave them some tools for how they might open up the group conversation. Next, before you go into any real difficult conversation, spend time writing out the emotions or feelings that come up for you as you think about having this conversation. And also imagine what emotions might come up for the other family members as they participate in this hard conversation. If you're like most people, this is one of the few things that you all share in common. Emotions like anxiety, fear, perhaps anger, worry, vulnerability, sadness, and concern. If emotions like that are going to come up for you, they're probably going to come up for them. And the reframe or the invitation is to say, we have a gulf of views on, in this case, what are we going to do with our parents' plot of land? The thing we share are all these negative emotions. And the joint challenge, the opportunity for us, is there a way we can shift what we share away from the hard and negative emotions and to a shared view, in this case, of how we're going to use our property. In another case, it might be a shared view of how to care for dad in his last years, or how will we handle the relationship that I have with your former husband. All of this prep work helps us set ourselves up for the actual mediation or difficult conversation we need to have with our family. So, in preparation for this difficult conversation, I can't stress enough the value of actually doing a moot or mock or practice trial run with a friend. This may seem like a lot of emotional energy and time, but doing this practice with a friend will often give you a huge amount of feedback that will make you better prepared for the real conversation. One of the domains of my professional work is working with clients to actually do moots or practices of these really hard conversations. And I have to tell you, in this family that I was working with, it was extremely powerful to do this practice work. One thing I want to say that I think is really important as you consider the possibility of having a difficult conversation, I want to encourage this as strongly as I can. I also want to remind you that if there are concerns of physical safety or revisiting trauma, those are cautions against engaging in such a conversation without taking the appropriate safeguards, which could mean having a lawyer or a mediator or a third-party facilitator. In the case of the family that I was working with, the next step was actually setting up an appropriate time and place for the conversation. And frankly, I had to do a lot of work here because this family lived in different places across the country. They were extremely busy. Some of them had careers where they were working literally 13 hours a day, and they wanted to do this on Zoom. They wanted to do it on Zoom in 45-minute blocks. That was a recipe for disaster. So choosing the right time and the right place is really important. And in this case, I knew that it was incredibly important to bring the family together in person and to do it over an extended period of time. Now that meant in this case some delay. We actually had to wait 3 months to get a weekend where everyone could fly into Ohio and we could actually have this conversation. I also knew in this case that having the conversation on the family property would have huge amounts of value because I would be able to remind the family of good memories that had happened on this property, of the potential for how the land might be used productively, and frankly, of the importance of paying the taxes and not losing the property. The last thing you may want to consider, which clearly this family had considered, is reaching out for some kind of professional help. That could come in the form of a mediator, or a facilitator, or a conflict resolution expert like me. Sometimes it could be a therapist. Sometimes, frankly, it might be bringing in someone in the family, maybe a revered uncle or an aunt that everyone respects and who has kind of the skills to help facilitate the conversation. So you're probably all wondering, what happened to the family I was working with? Well, I gotta tell you, I earned my keep. It was a pretty long weekend, and it was deeply rewarding. The family ultimately found a way to use the land that created all sorts of value, both monetarily, but also in other ways that were pretty unexpected going in. And the most important thing is that there was a meaningful reconciliation, a connection that this family found that had been lost years ago after their parents died. All this to say is that family rifts often feel intractable and unsolvable. So if you avoid making the mistakes of gossip, triangulation, and avoidance, if you do your own personal homework, if you set up the right process, and if you seek help when needed, engaging that family conflict can actually yield results that are meaningful for you and transformative for your family. So for more useful negotiation and conflict tools, watch this next video, Influence Mastery, the Art of Relationship Building. And before you leave, make sure you subscribe to my channel, like this video, and ring the bell so you'll never miss more useful tools that you'll find here. Okay, it's not difficult to keep watching. Click, click.